Hi everybody. I just thought that I would pop by. I've been reading some interesting books, just sort of waiting. I just thought I would pop by. Hello everyone. I've been reading some interesting books recently, trying to get some sort of new content together for Ravenous Butterflies. And I've got some books I've had on my bookcase for a year or two, which I haven't really had a chance to delve into. And one of them, I don't know if any of you have read it, is The Story of Art Without Men by Katie Hessel. It's really, really interesting, and it talks about how women have really basically not been written into history, into the history of art, the history of lots of things, literature, art, design, music, maths, I mean, you name it. Just look at the Nobel Prizes and things that are out there, most of them, majority are mostly men. So it's fascinating to have a read through, to start reading this book about how women are now thankfully being written back into art history and into history, so that my generation and our children's generation will be able to hopefully have a sort of clearer, broader, more accurate picture about what's been going on in the world. I'm not sure that my internet's going to be very good for this, but I'm hoping that you're going to be able to see me, because my internet's kind of been dropping out this weekend, but I'm going to try anyway. So I was reading this book, and what's fascinating about it is that she only really became aware of it, the author, Katie Hessel, when she actually started doing her dissertation and doing her degree in art history, and she decided that she was going to focus on an amazing artist, actually, Alice Neal. Now, I went and saw this exhibition at the Barbican Gallery, I think it was a couple of years ago, after COVID, with my children. And what was really amazing about Alice Neal is that she had, really tumultuous life, sort of extreme poverty, deprivation, lots of horrendous relationships, good times, bad times, real roller coaster of life. And she actually only did a self-portrait of herself in 1980, which is a naked nude self-portrait. It's the only self-portrait she did, and that was towards the end of her life. And she never gained any notoriety at all in the art world until Andy Warhol kind of plucked her out and decided that he was going to sort of showcase her a little bit in New York and take her around in New York. And it was only then in her 70s that she had any notoriety or recognition for her work. She almost died in abject poverty. So yeah, it's really quite shocking. And I'm going to read you the first kind of introductory pages of this book, because it's absolutely fascinating, and it kind of makes me want to learn more about what happened and where we went, how we got kind of, how we were invisible, how we became invisible really in history, in art history. So it says, in October 2015, I walked into an art fair and realised that out of thousands of artworks before me, not a single one was by a woman. This sparked a series of questions. Could I name 20 women artists off the top of my head? 10 pre-1950 and any pre-1850. Can you name any artists off the top of your head? I mean, there are people like Frida Kahlo, Bertha Morisot, and we now know lots more artists, but back then, I think they weren't really on the radar, and that's not even that long ago. That's like 9 years ago. So, the answer was no. Had I essentially been looking at the history of art from a male perspective? And the answer was yes. At the time, the exclusion of women artists and other underrepresented figures from the history of art was becoming an urgent issue. I just graduated from my BA in art history, and I'd chosen to study Alice Neal, a great American painter of psychologically charged portraits of people from all walks of life. But Neal was only recognised as a major painter by the art establishment when she was nearly in her 70s. Well, she was already in her 70s, actually. Studying Neal helped me notice that the overwhelming underrepresentation of women artists, they weren't in galleries, they weren't in museums, they weren't in contemporary shows, and they weren't to be found in art history. It's fascinating, isn't it? I wonder if you have the same, if you actually have the same, or you feel the same about that, because I actually feel very strongly about it. And why was this? The lack of women recognised as significant artists had been a subject of debate since at least the 1970s, when Linda Nocklin's groundbreaking essay, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists, was published at the dawn of the second feminist revolution. So you'd have thought that was in the 1970s. there was a second wave of feminism going on then. I remember that because I was quite young, and I remember that happening. And so in all that time, sort of 40 years, 50 years, why had nothing changed until 2015, until we start thinking about things? It's the same with other unrepresented and misrepresented populations and ethnic minorities and all sorts of things all over the world. Exactly the same. Art has always been a place for, white men, basically. And thankfully that's changing. When listing the artists who are typically said to define the art historical canon, it is the following names that most come up: Giotto, Botticelli, Titian, Leonardo, Caravaggio, Rembrandt, David, Delacroix, Manet, Gauguin, Van Gogh, Kandinsky, Pollock, Freud, Hockney and Hirst. I mean, I certainly learnt the majority of those when I did art history at college, so apart from the Hirst, he was at uni with me actually, strangely. I'm sure that many of you will have heard of them, but how many of these artists would you recognise? Anguissola, Fontana, Sirani, Peters, Gintellecci, Kaufmann, Powers, Lewis, MacDonald, Mackintosh, Valadon, Hoch, Asawa, Krasner, Mendieta, Pindel, Himid. If I hadn't actively studied women artists for the past 7 years, I doubt I would know more than a fraction of these names. I'm reading from this book, by the way. Should any of this be surprising? Not according to statistics. A study published in 2019 found that in the collections of 18 major US art museums, 87% of the artworks were by men. 87%? And 85% were white artists. So you're looking at probably at least 85% of the collection are white male artists, which is pretty shocking, really. Currently, women artists make up just 1% of London's National Gallery collection. 1%. 1%! The same museum only staged their first ever major solo exhibition by a historic female artist, Artemisia Gintellecci, in 2020, and 2023 will mark the first time that the Royal Academy of Arts in London has ever hosted a solo exhibition by a woman in their main space. That was Marina Abramovich. Just one woman of colour has individually won the Turner Prize, Lubiana Hamid, in 2017, and it took until 2022 for the first woman of colour to represent the US, Simone Lee, and the UK, Sonia Boyce, at the Venice Biennale. The most prestigious art event in the world. When I conducted a YouGov survey in 2022 to find out the British public's knowledge of women artists, well, actually, the British public don't generally know that much about art, to be honest. I do I go to a pub quiz. I'm in a little team, and we go every other week. And I've been going for weeks and weeks and weeks, well, months now, and I don't think that we've ever had any art questions at all. It's just really odd. So she conducted a study, and it said the results were that 30% could name more than 3 female artists, and 83% of 18 to 24-year-olds couldn't even name 3 female artists. And none of them had ever been taught about any female artists at school. In this country, we're cutting art history funding in schools, so not only are we cutting art history funding, we're cutting the arts generally. And I find it really, I'm a real advocate for art. Art can ground children. It can bring them back into themselves. It can help them express their emotions. You can kind of get into a child's brain really with art, through art, in a way that, perhaps only music can do, in terms of releasing their emotional kind of voice, which sometimes can be a little bit trapped inside. So I think it's so beneficial for well-being for young children, especially today when we have so many mental health issues. So if you want me to talk about my views on the arts in general when it comes to young children and young people, and actually older people as well, then we can have a whole talk about that. But at the moment, we're talking about women in art and how they are unrepresented. So she goes on to say that she was really, she went on to the art fair. She was very frustrated and angry about what she just witnessed. I typed the word women artists into Instagram. Nothing appeared. And so at the Great Women Artists, a name that pays homage to Nochlin was born. So she started at Great Women Artists. She's carried on to talk about doing extensive research. And then she talks about she believes that things could be inherently different about work created by artists of any particular gender. It's more that society and its gatekeepers have always prioritised one group in history, and I think it's vital for this to be addressed and challenged. Nearly 7 years later, the result of this book, Story of Art Without Men, was born. So she goes on to say that the canon of art history is global. However, with the male Western narrative being so unjustly dominant at the expense of others, it is this that I unpack and challenge. The book takes its title from the so-called introductory Bible to art history, E.H. Gombrich's The Story of Art, which I have up here in my thing, which I had to read when I was at art school. It's a wonderful book, but for one flaw. Its first edition from 1950 included 0 women artists, and even the 16th edition includes only 1 woman artist. It's really quite surprising and quite shocking. Anyway, so I could go on. There's an awful lot to say about that, but I won't, because I think that I've sort of begun the discussion. And it's just really, really important, I think, that we as a society fairly represent everybody who is involved in the arts, whether they are orange, purple, black, green, pink with purple spots, women, men, others, all of the LGBTQ community, the queers, the gays, the this, the that, everything. Everybody should be represented fairly. And it's really, really important that as history doesn't repeat itself, as we go forward, that we actually come together and support each other, I think. And that includes writing women into history and all of the people who have been forgotten in history. Come on, let's just, bring them forward. Let's talk about them. Let's open the discussion, and let's make sure that, this never happens again. I think going forward, whether or not there's going to be sort of, the seesaw is going to be uneven for a while as we try to rectify the imbalance. So it might sort of be a bit like this, and there might be lots and lots of swings up and down, and people might feel that too many women artists are being represented, too many people from minority groups are being represented. But frankly, I don't care. I think it's it's very, very important that we have a big shout out for all of those people that haven't been written into history before, and also go back retrospectively and find them, discover who really did the work. I mean, if you're looking at artists and designers, just don't, let's just look at the muses that all these great artists had, and the assistants that they had in their studios. A lot of their assistants were women. A lot of the muses actually were great artists and ended up being silenced by the masters, who were, the famous artists of the time. So I think it's just really important that we readdress history and look at that balance, I suppose. Anyway, that's my rant for the day. I thought I would just pop by and sort of share that with you, because I do find it infuriating as a woman. I mean, I know I'm kind of a middle-class white woman, but I still find it very, very infuriating. And my children are mixed race, and I think it's very, very important that they are able to have their say. Both my sons are gay, and it's important that they are able to express themselves freely, creatively. They're both artists. Thankfully, they're very good ones, and they're doing extremely well, so I'm very proud of them. And there is more of an opening for them these days than there was before, but long may that last. And we can't be too we can't relax on our laurels, because we never know if all of that's going to get shut down. Who knows? Oh, that was nice. I had a glass of water there. So anyway, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for joining me again. I've done a lovely recording which I'm posting later on today, which is very relaxing. So this is probably a bit frenetic because I feel very strongly about it. I'm not a hugely political person, but I just don't like injustice, and I find this very unjust. And I will be reading the book, so I'm sure that you'll be getting some little snippets of my readings in the future. So if you have any suggestions about what you'd like me to talk about, please do let me know, and please do put your comments in the comment box. put my glasses on, I can read what people are saying. Yes, there we go. Penny Winter says, Sir Ken Robinson is also a great advocate for the importance of art in schools. I understand that the palace supported him and he was evolving the British school system. I'm sorry to hear arts are being culled. I have to say, my sons both went to the Royal Drawing School. One of them did his foundation course there, and one of them did his MA there, the drawing year there. And that is run by the King's Trust now, actually. So King Charles has been a massive advocate for helping arts and keeping traditional arts going as well. Things like gilding, and renovation and restoration and picture restoration and stone carving and all the traditional arts and crafts that we need really to keep our buildings and historic buildings and collections alive and in good repair, but also teaching those skills to future craftspeople and teaching traditional art to young people. So at the Royal Drawing School they did they're taught everything traditionally, drawing, painting, printmaking, sculpture, and they have fantastic life drawing classes, and it's amazing. So if anybody's in the UK and they're looking to do a course in the UK that's going to give them a really good grounding on sort of old-fashioned proper art school, then that's a really good place to go, and the tutors are amazing. So I shall love you and leave you. Let's have a look. So Debbie says hi from Alaska. Kiki says, well, she's got an easel and a heart and a book, so great, that's great. And yeah, Edie says, thank you for bringing up this important issue. I mean, it's so important, and I think that it's something that we don't really think about it, do we? I mean, everybody's sort of banging on about all sorts of things and politics and wars and goodness knows what, but as civilization marches on, which it does, what are we going to leave behind? Our legacy of what? We're going to hopefully be able to write everybody up in history this time and not make those mistakes again. Please, let's not repeat those mistakes again. And please, everybody, just be kind to each other. And we've got to nurture each other. And the arts are a really good way of doing that. And, I think we have so many lessons we have to learn, with regard to the world, with nature, with climate change, all sorts of things, politics, everything. So, yeah, just let's stick together and keep smiling. Anyway, lots and lots of love. I'm going to go now. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye. And keep those ideas coming in, because if there's anything you want me to talk about, or if you know of any fantastic women artists that you'd like me to feature, I can have a little research and read up on them and do sort of a nice few art presentations, and we can talk about paintings together and things and their lives together. I think that would be really fascinating and educational and refreshing. Lots of love. Or if you've got some work, actually, if you're an artist and you've got some work that you would like me to share, I'll try and do my best with that too. Bye bye.